The plea from the shadows. The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly, a silent abyss where even the faintest sound seemed impossible. On the edge of humanity's explored galaxy, an old human outpost sat quietly on a desolate asteroid. Its metal walls groaned under the pressure of time and isolation. The crew of this station had grown used to the silence, the monotonous hum of machinery, and the occasional chatter to break the dullness. Captain Harris, a seasoned war veteran, leaned back in his worn-out chair, sipping a bitter cup of synthetic coffee. His crew, a mix of grizzled survivors and curious explorers, were scattered across the control room. Just another routine day, or so they thought. Then, it happened. A crackling noise pierced through the stillness. The outpost's ancient communication system flickered to life, spitting static. The crew exchanged puzzled looks. No one had sent or expected a transmission. Slowly, the static cleared, and a voice, desperate and trembling, broke through. "Humans, please, save me. My jailer is close. He will break me." The voice wasn't human. It had a strange, melodic tone, layered with echoes, yet there was no mistaking the terror within it. The crew froze. The words hung heavy in the air, sinking deep into their minds. Captain Harris straightened in his chair, his eyes narrowing. "Did anyone else hear that?" he asked, his voice calm but sharp. The crew nodded silently, their faces pale. No one wanted to say what they were thinking, but the tension was palpable. An alien, pleading for help. It was unheard of. Aliens were either hostile or indifferent. They didn't ask for help, let alone from humans. The voice returned, weaker this time. "Please, I beg you, the jailer, he will destroy me." And just like that, the transmission cut off. Silence returned, heavier than before. Lieutenant Ramirez, the station's communication officer, quickly typed commands into the system. "I'm tracing the signal," she muttered, her hands shaking slightly. "It's coming from an abandoned sector near the shattered moon." "That's Archelian territory," muttered Davis, the station's engineer. His voice carried a mix of fear and disdain. The Zarkelians, a powerful alien race, were known for their brutality. Humanity had barely survived their last encounter years ago. Harris rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Could be a trap," he said, his voice steady. "Or it could be real." "Why would an alien ask us for help?" Davis argued. "We're not their saviors. We're barely holding on ourselves." The crew murmured in agreement, but Ramirez spoke up. "Captain, it sounded real. Whoever it was, they're in danger." The room fell silent again. Harris's mind raced. He didn't trust aliens, not after the war. But there was something about that voice, the sheer desperation in it. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being pulled into something bigger. "Trace the signal," Harris ordered finally. "Let's see where it leads." "But Captain," Davis began to protest. Harris cut him off with a glare. "We're explorers, Davis. If someone's in trouble, we don't turn away, even if it's an alien." Ramirez nodded and focused on her screen. The rest of the crew exchanged uneasy glances, but followed the captain's lead. As the coordinates loaded onto their navigation system, the outpost shuddered slightly, as if the universe itself was warning them. The signal's origin was confirmed, a derelict Zarkelian prison ship drifting lifelessly near the shattered moon. It was a graveyard of alien technology, a place no one dared to approach. Yet the crew prepared their small ship, the starbound Hope, for departure. Harris's decision was final. As the crew boarded their vessel, the atmosphere grew tense. Ramirez double-checked the communication logs. "The transmission was weak," she said. "Whoever sent it, they don't have much time. Or they don't want us to know the whole story," Davis muttered under his breath. The starbound Hope powered up, its engines humming softly. As it left the outpost, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The vastness of space seemed darker, more oppressive. As they approached the shattered moon, the eerie sight of the prison ship came into view. Its massive frame floated silently, its hull scared and battered. Dim lights flickered sporadically, like the heartbeat of something barely alive. The ship looked abandoned, but the crew knew better than to trust appearances. Inside the cockpit, Harris stared at the ship with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Bring us in closer," he ordered. "But keep the shields up. I don't want any surprises." As the starbound Hope inched closer to the derelict vessel, the crew's nerves were on edge. Ramirez tried to scan for life signs, but the readings were inconsistent. "I'm picking up faint energy signatures," she reported. "But nothing definitive." "Great," Davis muttered. "We're flying blind." Harris ignored the comment. His focus was on the ship ahead. Whoever, or whatever, had sent that message was somewhere inside. He didn't know if they were walking into a trap or a rescue mission. But one thing was certain, they couldn't turn back now. As the starbound Hope docked with the prison ship, a low rumble echoed through their vessel. It wasn't mechanical. It was almost alive. Harris gripped the controls tightly, his jaw clenched. "Stay alert," he said, his voice firm. "We don't know what we're dealing with." And as the crew prepared to step into the unknown, a chilling thought lingered in their minds. What kind of jailer could make even an alien beg for humanity's help? The derelict prison ship. The starbound Hope glided silently through the darkness, drawing closer to the broken figure of the Zarkelian prison ship. Its jagged hull reflected faint light from the shattered moon nearby, making it look like the corpse of a giant beast drifting in the void. Inside the cockpit, Captain Harris narrowed his eyes, studying the vessel through the viewport. It was massive, yet eerily still. "This place looks like it's been dead for years," Davis muttered, adjusting his seat uncomfortably. "Why would anyone still be here?" Ramirez didn't take her eyes off the blinking screen in front of her. "I don't know, but there's energy coming from inside. Something's keeping the lights on." A flicker of unease passed through the crew. It didn't feel right. The ship looked abandoned, but it wasn't powerless. As they approached the docking port, the faint sound of static returned, crackling softly over the comms. The voice, so faint it was almost a whisper, slipped through again. "Closer, please. Hurry." Harris clenched his jaw. That voice hadn't just disappeared into nothing. It was still out there, waiting. The docking clamps extended with a metallic groan, locking onto the derelict ship. The hatch hissed open, releasing a stale gust of air from within. The smell hit them first, metallic, damp, and laced with something faintly rotten. "Smells like something died in here," Davis grunted, pulling a cloth over his nose. "Keep your guard up," Harris ordered, stepping forward. "Let's move." The corridor stretched out before them, dimly lit by flickering emergency lights. The walls were scared, blackened by plasma burns. Rust-red stains ran along the floor, dragging toward the far end of the hallway. "This wasn't a prison riot," Ramirez whispered, kneeling to inspect the marks. "These were claw marks. Whatever was locked in here fought its way out." Davis let out a slow breath. "I hate this already." As they pressed deeper into the ship, the silence grew heavier. It felt like they were trespassing in a tomb. But the faint hum of power beneath their feet reminded them. Something here was still awake. They passed row after row of cells, their thick glass doors shattered or melted away. Inside, only scraps of restraints and scorched metal remained. No signs of life. Until Ramirez's scanner beeped. "Heat signature," she said sharply, pointing down a branching corridor. "Small, but it's moving." The crew exchanged glances. "Let's follow it," Harris said without hesitation. They moved quietly, footsteps muffled by the damp floor. The corridor twisted and narrowed, leading them to a section that felt different, older. The metal here was darker, colder, as if the prison's secrets were buried deeper. At the end of the hall, they found it. A single cell door, still intact. But this one hadn't been forced open. It stood ajar, its lock flashing red, as if someone had manually released it. Ramirez's scanner trembled in her hand. "Captain, this is where the heat signature ends." Harris stepped closer, peering inside. The room was small, empty except for deep gouges carved into the walls. But in the farthest corner, almost blending with the shadows, something shifted. A figure, thin, trembling, and barely visible, curled against the wall. Before anyone could speak, the voice returned, louder this time, echoing directly into their ears. "You found me." The crew froze, hearts pounding. The alien lifted its head, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "But he knows you're here now." From somewhere behind them, heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. The jailer had arrived. The jailer appears. The footsteps weren't hurried. They came slow, deliberate, like someone who already knew there was no escape. Each step rang out through the hollow corridors, metal scraping against metal. Captain Harris signaled the crew to fall back toward the cell. Davis's hand hovered over his sidearm, but Harris shook his head. Not yet. The alien prisoner huddled in the corner, trembling. Her thin, sharp features flickered beneath the faint light, and her eyes, large and silver, darted nervously toward the hallway. "He's coming," she whispered. Her voice carried a strange rhythm, like two overlapping tones. "I told you not to come here. He will not stop." "Who is he?" Harris crouched beside her, keeping his voice low. She stared at him, confusion etched across her face. "You don't know." Before Harris could respond, the footsteps stopped. The lights overhead flickered violently, casting long, jagged shadows against the walls. Then he appeared. A towering figure emerged from the far end of the corridor. The jailer was unlike any Zarkelian soldier they had encountered before. His armor shifted like liquid metal, adjusting with every movement. His face was obscured by a smooth, featureless mask, except for two slits that glowed with pale blue light. He stood still, as if inspecting them. "Leave," the jailer said, his voice echoing unnaturally. "You are not prisoners here." Ramirez tightened her grip on the scanner. "Captain, I'm picking up enhanced biosignatures. This thing isn't just armor. It's alive." Harris stepped forward, meeting the jailer's gaze. "We're not leaving without her." The jailer's head tilted slightly. "She does not belong to you." "She doesn't belong to you either," Harris shot back. "What is this place? Why is she being held here?" The jailer's glowing eyes narrowed. "She is property, a prisoner of war. You are interfering with things you do not understand." At that moment, the alien prisoner spoke, her voice shaking but defiant. "I am not property." The jailer's gaze snapped toward her. For a brief second, the air seemed to grow heavier, as if the ship itself was reacting to his mood. "She has stolen what is forbidden," the jailer said coldly, "and she will be broken for it." A sharp metallic sound echoed, as blades extended from the jailer's wrists. The edges glowed faintly, vibrating with deadly energy. Harris didn't wait. "Move," he barked, raising his weapon. Davis and Ramirez spread out, taking defensive positions as the jailer stepped forward, his movements fluid and predatory. The prisoner grabbed Harris's arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "You cannot win against him," she said urgently. Harris pulled free, eyes locked on the advancing jailer. "We don't need to win. We just need to get you out of here." The jailer lunged, faster than they expected. Ramirez fired, her energy bolt striking his chest, but the armor absorbed it without so much as a dent. Davis cursed under his breath. "This isn't working, Captain." The jailer advanced, deflecting each shot with ease. The shifting metal of his armor absorbed and redirected the energy, making him appear more like a phantom than a soldier. "Fall back," Harris shouted, grabbing the alien's arm and pulling her toward the exit. The jailer didn't follow immediately. Instead, he stopped and watched as they retreated. His voice echoed down the hall, cold and certain. "You cannot hide her. I will find you." As the crew ran toward their ship, the alien prisoner looked back one last time. "The jailer doesn't stop," she whispered. "But neither do humans, right?" Harris glanced at her with a small, determined smile. "You've got that right." But deep down, he knew the jailer's words weren't a threat. They were a promise. The hidden fugitive. The starbound Hope jolted violently as the docking clamps disengaged, pulling away from the derelict prison ship. Inside the cramped cabin, the alien prisoner huddled near the back wall, her silver eyes darting nervously to every corner as if expecting the jailer to step through the bulkhead at any moment. Captain Harris paced near the cockpit, stealing glances at her between barking orders to Ramirez and Davis. "Get us as far from that ship as possible. I don't care if we burn half our fuel. Put distance between us and him." Davis punched in the coordinates, tension thick in his voice. "Already working on it, Captain." The hum of the engines filled the silence, but it did little to ease the weight pressing down on the crew. Ramirez finally broke it, turning her chair to face the alien. "You want to tell us what exactly we just pulled out of there? Because that jailer didn't seem like he was chasing the common thief." The alien shifted uncomfortably. Her skin shimmered faintly under the lights, almost translucent. She avoided their eyes, curling her knees to her chest. "I didn't steal," she said softly. "I survived." Harris stopped pacing, crossing his arms. "Start talking. We didn't risk our necks for half an answer." She hesitated, then finally exhaled as if surrendering to the inevitable. "I was not a prisoner by lot," she began. "I was an experiment. The jailer isn't just a guard. He's a creation of the Zarkelians, designed to keep things like me from escaping." Davis scoffed. "Experiment? You don't exactly look like a weapon." Her silver eyes flashed, a flicker of something hidden beneath her calm exterior. "I wasn't made to fight. I was made to hide." Ramirez leaned forward, intrigued. "Hide from what?" The alien met Harris's gaze. "From them. The jailers. There aren't many left, but those that remain are relentless." Harris frowned. "So, what did you do to end up in that cell?" She lowered her head. "I learned how to disappear too well. I learned things the Zarkelians didn't intend for me to know." The room grew colder. Davis narrowed his eyes. "And what exactly did you learn?" The alien's lips parted, but before she could answer, the ship's alarm blared. "Proximity alert." Ramirez spun back to her console. "Something's following us." Harris rushed to the viewport. A dark shape drifted just outside of visual range, partially obscured by the asteroid belt they were cutting through. It was sleek, predatory, and gaining fast. Davis cursed under his breath. "He found us." The alien's voice trembled. "I told you. He doesn't stop." Harris gritted his teeth, slamming his fist against the console. "Full power to the engines. We're not outrunning him. But we're not going down without a fight." As the ship accelerated, Ramirez's fingers danced across the control panel. "He's locking onto us, Captain, if he boards." "He won't," Harris snapped. "Not while I'm breathing." But as the ship shuddered under the force of the jailer's approach, the alien prisoner whispered something barely audible. "You can't fight him like this." Harris turned sharply. "Then give me something, or we all die." For the first time she stood, her gaze fierce. "I can show you how to break him, but you'll have to trust me." The room fell silent except for the distant hum of the pursuing vessel. Harris held her stare for a long moment, then nodded. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's break a jailer." The human stand. The starbound Hope shook violently as the jailer's ship closed the distance, latching onto them like a predator sinking its claws into prey. The cabin lights flickered, and the screech of metal on metal echoed through the ship. "He's boarding," Ramirez said, her voice tight with panic. She drew her blaster, eyes darting to the entry hatch. Davis cursed, slamming his fist against the control panel. "Captain, we can't outrun him, and we sure as hell can't shoot him down." "What's the plan?" Captain Harris's eyes narrowed as he looked toward the alien prisoner standing quietly at the back of the room. "We make our stand," Harris said calmly, gripping his rifle. "If the jailer wants her, he'll have to go through us." The alien's silver eyes softened with something close to gratitude, but there was hesitation too. "You don't understand," she said, stepping forward. "You can't stop him with your weapons. His armor." "We know," Harris interrupted. "Absorbs energy, shrugs off bullets, but humans have a habit of breaking things we're not supposed to." A deep, resonant thud echoed through the ship. The sound wasn't mechanical. It felt alive. Davis's knuckles whitened around his blaster. "Whatever we're doing, we better do it fast." Harris turned to the alien. "You said you can show us how to break him. Now's the time." She hesitated, eyes flicking to the sealed hatch. "There's a flaw in his armor, but it's dangerous." "Dangerous is better than dead," Ramirez muttered, moving to cover the entrance. The alien took a breath and placed her hand against the ship's metal wall, her fingers shimmering faintly. "He relies on his armor to bind to his body," she explained. "But if you overload the magnetic core in his chest, it will disrupt the link between the armor and his nervous system. He'll be vulnerable for a few seconds." Harris nodded. "Seconds are enough." Another thud. This time, the hatch began to glow, molten metal dripping from the edges as the jailer began cutting through. Harris's grip on his rifle tightened. "Davis, get to engineering. Prep the EMP. Ramirez, cover the door. We hold him off long enough for Davis to overload his core." The hatch buckled inward, groaning under the force. Ramirez took position, rifle aimed. "Any last words, Captain?" Harris smirked faintly. "Yeah, humans don't hand over the defenseless." With a deafening shriek, the hatch was torn apart. The jailer stepped through, his towering form filling the room with unnatural grace. His featureless mask glowed faintly, and the blades on his wrists shimmered with raw energy. "Step aside," the jailer said, his voice cold and hollow. "I have no quarrel with you." Harris leveled his rifle at the towering figure. "That's funny," he replied, "because we got a hell of a quarrel with you." The jailer tilted his head, almost curious. Then, without warning, he lunged. Ramirez fired first, the energy blast striking the jailer's chest, but his armor rippled, absorbing the impact. Harris followed, aiming for the head, but the shot glanced off the smooth surface of the mask. The jailer moved like liquid, closing the distance in seconds. His blade lashed out, slicing through the bulkhead just inches from Ramirez's head. "Davis," Harris shouted. "Working on it." Davis's voice crackled through the comms. "EMP in 30 seconds. Make it 15. Harris growled, dodging a swipe from the jailer's blade. The alien prisoner stepped forward, holding her hands out. "Jailer, stop," she shouted. "You don't have to do this." The jailer hesitated for half a second. That was all Harris needed. He tackled the jailer from the side, driving him back into the corridor. The jailer staggered, but his armor stabilized instantly, pushing Harris aside effortlessly. 10 seconds, Davis yelled. The jailer straightened, turning his gaze back to the alien. "You cannot hide forever," he said. "I will finish this." "Not today," Harris growled. Davis's voice crackled over the comm. "EMP primed. Fire in 3, 2, 1. A pulse of energy surged through the ship, and the jailer's armor spasmed violently. The glow in his eyes flickered, and his movements slowed. "Now," Harris barked. Ramirez unloaded her blaster into the exposed core on the jailer's chest. Sparks erupted as the armor cracked, and the jailer stumbled forward, blades retracting. For the first time, the jailer seemed vulnerable. Harris stepped forward, rifle aimed. "You're not as invincible as you thought," he said coldly. The jailer's eyes flickered weakly, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "This isn't over." With that, the jailer collapsed, his armor seizing up as the core overloaded. The room fell silent except for the hum of the Starbound Hope's engines. Harris turned to the alien prisoner. "You're safe. For now." She met his gaze, gratitude reflecting in her silver eyes. "I knew humans wouldn't run," she said softly. Harris smiled faintly, lowering his weapon. "You've got a lot to learn about us." Breaking the jailer. The jailer's body twitched on the floor, faint blue light flickering from the cracks in his armor. Smoke curled from his chest, but even now, Harris could see the armor starting to mend itself, slowly but surely. Davis wiped sweat from his brow, breathing heavily. "I don't know how long that EMP will hold him. This thing's regenerating like nothing I've ever seen." Ramirez reloaded her blaster, stepping back cautiously. "Captain, we need to get rid of him before he's back on his feet." Harris knelt beside the jailer's still form, studying the exposed core beneath the shattered armor. He glanced at the alien prisoner. "You said there's a way to stop him permanently. What aren't you telling us?" Her silver eyes lingered on the jailer, soft with something that almost looked like pity. "His core isn't just a power source. It's part of him. The armor binds to his consciousness. If you destroy the core completely..." She trailed off, reluctant to finish the sentence. "He dies," Harris concluded grimly. The alien nodded. "Yes, and part of him will try to stop you until the last moment." Davis glanced at the jailer nervously. "Well, he tried to break us first. I say it's only fair." Ramirez stepped closer. "Captain, if we're doing this, we need to move now." Harris hesitated. He wasn't one to take lives lightly, not even the life of a relentless alien jailer. But leaving this thing operational wasn't an option. He exhaled slowly. "Davis, prep the core disruptor. Ramirez, keep your weapon on him." As Davis crouched near the jailer, connecting the disruptor's cables to the damaged core, the alien prisoner knelt beside him. Her voice softened. "He wasn't always like this." Harris raised an eyebrow. "You know him?" She nodded faintly. "Before the war, before the experiments, he was a soldier, like you. But the Zarkelians turned him into something else. They erased what he was." Ramirez's grip tightened on her blaster. "So why do you care?" "He's been hunting you." The alien's gaze didn't leave the jailer. "Because if you destroy him, you destroy the last piece of who he was, even if it's buried deep." Harris felt the weight of her words settle on the room, but there was no time for doubt. The jailer's fingers twitched, faint energy humming through his limbs. His eyes flickered weakly open, locking onto Harris. "You will not win," the jailer rasped, his voice fractured and distant. Harris's jaw tightened. "We're not here to win. We're here to survive." Davis's voice cut through the tension. "Disruptors ready. Just say the word, Captain." Harris looked down at the jailer one last time, searching for any trace of what the prisoner had described. But all he saw was a weapon, one that wouldn't stop until they were all dead. He gave a curt nod. "Do it." Davis pressed the trigger. The disruptor whirred to life, sending a surge of energy into the core. The jailer's body arched violently, blue light flaring as the armor cracked apart. His eyes locked onto the alien prisoner, and for the briefest moment, the coldness in them faded. His voice softened to a whisper. "I remember you." And then the light dimmed. The armor crumbled away, and the towering figure of the jailer collapsed into stillness. The core shattered, its faint glow flickering out like a dying star. The room fell silent, save for the hum of the Starbound Hope's engines. Harris exhaled, rising to his feet. "It's over." The alien prisoner stood, her expression unreadable as she stared at the fallen jailer. "Thank you," she said quietly. Davis leaned against the wall, exhausted. "We just took down an unstoppable killing machine. You'd think I'd feel more excited about it." Ramirez smirked faintly. "Maybe next time." As the crew began cleaning up the wreckage, Harris turned to the alien prisoner. "You've got a lot of explaining to do, but for now, you're safe." She met his gaze, a small but genuine smile crossing her lips. Safe, for now. And as the starbound Hope drifted further into the stars, Harris couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Alliance. The remains of the jailer's armor lay scattered across the cargo bay floor, nothing more than twisted shards of dark metal. The faint hum of the core had long since faded, leaving behind a stillness that felt unfamiliar, almost too quiet. Captain Harris leaned against the console, arms crossed as he watched Davis sweep away the last pieces. Ramirez sat nearby, reassembling her blaster with sharp, practiced movements. The alien prisoner stood at the far end of the bay, her gaze fixed on the largest fragment of the jailer's mask. The faint blue glow that once flickered behind the iceless was gone, leaving behind only cold, lifeless metal. Harris finally broke the silence. "You've been staring at that piece for a while." The alien's silver eyes didn't move from the mask. He was the last of his kind. Ramirez glanced up. He wasn't exactly the friendly type. The alien nodded faintly. No, but he was something. Now, he's gone. Harris stepped closer, studying her carefully. "You're not like him. You're not a weapon. So what happens now?" She turned to face him, her expression softening. "I leave." Davis snorted, tossing a chunk of metal into a crate. "That's it. We save you from a walking nightmare, and you just take off." The alien's lips curled into a small smile. "Humans don't save people for rewards." "Isn't that what you said, Captain?" Harris chuckled under his breath. "I did, but I also like knowing what happens to the people we pull out of burning wrecks." She hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. "The Zarkilians were keeping something hidden on that prison ship, something bigger than just me." Ramirez frowned. "Bigger than a regenerating death machine." The alien nodded. "Yes. They were afraid of it. That's why they created the jailers, to guard the things they fear most. But he wasn't guarding me. I was only part of it." Harris's eyes narrowed. What was he guarding? She glanced out the viewport at the distant stars. "A map, to a system the Zarkilians locked away long ago. I took part of the coordinates before I escaped, but I need the rest." Davis scoffed. "So you're telling me we just got dragged into some intergalactic treasure hunt?" The alien tilted her head, silver eyes shimmering. "It's not treasure. It's knowledge. And if I'm right, it's something the Zarkilians would destroy entire star systems to keep hidden." Harris exchanged glances with Ramirez and Davis. Ramirez smirked. "I'm in. Beats sitting on this rust bucket." Davis threw his hands up. "Of course we're doing this. Why not poke the hornet's nest a little harder?" Harris grinned faintly, turning back to the alien. "Looks like you're not leaving alone." The alien's eyes softened with gratitude. "Thank you." As the starbound Hope powered up, its engines glowing brightly against the vast emptiness of space, Harris stared out at the stars ahead. "You said the Zarkilians are afraid of what's out there," he said quietly. "Maybe it's about time they remembered why humans aren't so easy to break." And with that, the starbound Hope disappeared into the void, chasing down the secrets that even the strongest jailers couldn't keep hidden forever.